Shifting breezes grace the inner spectrum of your glance.
Yo, welcome to the very first episodes of the Mind Podcast with Hakeem. Today we have a very special guest, someone I like to call my brother. We will be interviewing Tyler Springer today. Tyler is a graduate from Grandview University with a BA in sports management. Shortly after he graduated college, he became a realtor at Iowa Realty, and he's absolutely crushing it in the Des Moines area, guys. On top of that, he's in the beginning stages of creating a nonprofit in the inner city of Des Moines with the focus on giving residents the resources to jump on the ownerships and ideas. Tyler, introduce yourself to the people, man.
Well, first, I want to thank you. I feel very honored being the first guest on this show. I know that you've been working hard on it, so hopefully we can give our people a good dose and get this thing rolling. So, yeah, thank you.
No, most certainly, man. Pleasure to have you. I appreciate that, too. So today, me and Tyler will be discussing redlining. If you're not familiar with the term, it's something that's dated back long time in history where minority people of color could not get like housing in the suburban and nicer areas. So Tyler is pretty much an expert in this area, so he's going to jump right in on that and give us a brief discussion about redlining and all the major issues that it has dealt with on people of minority and color background. So before we jump in, I'd like to do an icebreaker question for my guests, and I want to surprise Tyler with this one. So Tyler, before we get into redlining, I need you to give the people your top 3 people, dead or alive, you would have a cup of coffee with today, just to be a sponge and fly on the wall, should I say?
Dang, that's a good question. Number one would have to be Jesus Christ.
Oh, most certainly.
He's my Lord and Savior, and he's responsible for everything, all the blessings of my life. So number one, imagine having coffee with Jesus Christ. That'd be crazy.
That'd be dope.
Number 2,
it's tough.
Yeah, no, it's tough. Malcolm Gladwell. I don't know if he's Jesus Christ is definitely number 1.
Yeah.
Number 2, Malcolm Gladwell.
That's your favorite author?
Super intelligent, and has, don't want to get too deep into this, but in terms of like political beliefs and stuff like that, he's very much alike with me and very open-minded and just willing to talk to people. And I think when it comes to that, like when it comes to politics, like people don't want to talk to people that are different than them. And I'm the opposite. I don't care if you think, I want to hear what you say. And I think Malcolm Gladwell is one of those things. So I can only imagine conversation with them. That'd be pretty sweet. And then number 3, you got to keep in mind, I don't drink coffee too.
That's true.
But,
so tea.
Tea. Number 3, I'd have to go with, can I do a 1A, 1B type of thing? Either KD or Kawhi Leonard, just because, I, despite what you have to say about Kevin Durant, I like how, not what you have to say, what people have to say about Kevin Durant, I like how he carries himself. And then Kawhi Leonard just seems like a super interesting human being, and I'd love to kind of crack the code on him and get to know him a little bit more. So.
And I think that third pick just shows your love for basketball. Tyler was my college basketball teammate, by the way, for the folks. But that just shows your love for the basketball, because I definitely, making this list, I always think I want to put 3 hoop players in it, but I can't because they know the game, but not as much knowledge. So we're gonna dive straight into the interview on redlining and the situations and the issues that it has in today's society. So my first question for Tyler is, just give the people a good overall view of what we will be covering on the topic today. What would you consider the main problem here dealing with redlining in America?
So, redlining, do you want me to tell the history of it a little bit, or are we going to?
You can give the history.
Okay, so what redlining is, for those of you who don't know, back in 1934, the Federal Housing Administration was formed through the National Housing Act, FHA for short, Federal Housing Administration. And they were formed to ensure loans that banks would make. So for instance, if I got a loan and I defaulted on it, the FHA insured those loans so that the banks were guaranteed still to get their money.
Yep.
But the thing is, the FHA created these maps literal maps. These maps were created back then, and again, 1934, in cities with 40,000 people or more. So at that time, you know, metropolitan areas, country cities weren't, or country towns weren't involved in it, but they were literally color maps. So the term redlining comes from, they frame these areas of the map, areas of town, in red, color it in, yellow, green, blue. The red is, it's told banks that it's not safe to lend here, that their money's not guaranteed, and you know it's a risky investment for them, because at the end of the day, when banks lend people money for a home loan, it's an investment on their end. They're going to make money off of you. That's why they do it in the first place. Yellow is, you know, if you have a significant cash on hand or really good financial profile, then maybe we consider lending to you. Green and blue, we're like, okay, if you have 3% down, if you have the basics of home ownership, we'll lend to you. But the funny thing is, and it blows my mind that some people still deny this, the red parts of the map just so happen to be mostly minority communities. And we can pull up these maps everywhere. Actually, University of Richmond did a study a few years back called Mapping Inequality, and they digitized maps from 200 cities across the United States to show what these redlining maps look like back in the 30s and 40s. And again, looking at Des Moines, those areas that were redlined that weren't safe to lend in are still, and knowing my history, were back then mostly minority communities. So kind of interesting to look at those. They also, in Iowa, they have a map for Council Bluffs, Sioux City, Davenport, Waterloo, and Des Moines. So it's really interesting to see. I encourage people to look that up. Again, Mapping Inequality by the University of Richmond, and you can pull it up, and if you're from Sioux City, see how your neighborhood stacks up. But it's kind of interesting and alarming in the same breath, looking at those maps and seeing the
demographics of it.
And I think something else not to cut you off, something else to mention too is, back in the day, in the green and blue portions of the map, not every single portion of it was like this, but in half of the portions, at least from my study and research, in the deeds of these homes, the covenants of these homes, that say, we'll lend you money for this house, but a black, Mexican, Asian family cannot live here. It's white only. So like, that's blatant racism. And if you go back further enough and look at the deeds in some of those areas that had those covenants in place, that language is still included in there. And I've seen it myself. I've seen evidence of it. So it's just kind of crazy to think about. Now, today, legally that can't happen, but
you still see it in the deeds.
In different ways. Lenders aren't going to say they're redlining, but it happens.
Yeah. So you kind of hit on briefly the start of it, but what I want to ask you next is, from the start of it, what you said was in the 1940s or 30s?
1934.
1934.
Is when the FHA was created, and then it continued over a number of years.
1934, and today, in 2020, these maps, not identical, but they still kind of look the same, is what you're saying?
Yeah, so if you pull up a map of like average property value, the green and blue areas of the redlining map have a much higher property value versus the areas that were redlined in those old maps from the 1930s. They have a much lower property value. So the impact of this blatant racist housing practices back in the 1930s is still completely evident today. Like you have to have your head under a rock to not notice it.
Yeah. Cool. So with that information, I think we just gotta look deeper into redlining as a whole. You know,
Right.
You had something, Tyler?
No.
Okay, yeah, but you got to look deeply into redlining as a whole. I think it's important for us to learn the demographics, no matter the color, of redlining. So my next question for Tyler would be, how does redlining affect the minority communities when it comes to generating wealth?
Right. So, I mean, again, and I don't know if I touched on this, but what the FHA was doing was they were allowing home buyers to come in with very, very low down payment. So 3%. The FHA is still around. It's it's called an FHA loan. You can now get it for 3.5%. So it allows lower income, lower credit borrowers to get a house when they normally wouldn't with a conventional loan. So back then, all of a sudden they're popping up all these housing developments, which is how the suburbs were created. And developers are doing this because they know people would fill them up because of these FHA loans, right? So that allowed a lot of white families to get started on the path to home ownership, and because of that, creating wealth. The saying goes, 90% of the world's millionaires became so through real estate. Real estate is a very, very powerful tool to create wealth over the long term. And there's all types of things that you can do with equity, how much of the home you own, to help your family out. So you hear about it all the time. Parents taking equity out of their house to send their kids to college. Parents taking equity out of their house to give their kids money for a down payment on their own house. Parents taking equity out of the house to pay for weddings or to pay off student debt, or all different types of things, to take family vacations. You can go back to the bank and refinance your loan and pull the equity that you have, the ownership you have, and turn it into cash and go use it to spend things. So that's the number one thing with me, is these white families that weren't subject to this redlining back in the 30s and 40s got started on that wealth building journey, and over the course of 30, 40, 50 years, the equity that these families were growing, they were able to take advantage of it. That's when you start creating that generational wealth. And you hate talking about it, but when a family member dies and they leave a house behind, boom, that's a huge asset
right,
for
to
that
the
family
family
to have. So when it happens year out, then it gives people a slight head start in life. So
slight head start in life. That's a great way to put it.
I think another thing too is like the mindset that comes with that. I've talked to a couple of different people in my life, minority friends of mine that are minorities, and some of them are confused on what renting versus owning is. Like some of them don't even realize that that's an option. Like you mean you can actually own your house type of thing. Like they're in this mindset of they have to rent all their life. And again, it's just that comes from their great grandparents not being able to own, and then their great grandparents not being able to own, and so on and so forth.
It's a cycle, just trickle down, like the same way reverse that you was just explaining. Like if someone passed away, they get a jump start in life. We get the back start in life because of the situations that we've been thrown into and not getting the resource and things like that. So there's a ton of more problems with redlining, but me and Tyler are not going to dive into all that today with criminal justice system and education. We felt like we didn't have the need to speak on that topic today, but those are some of the key problems when it comes to generating wealth and people of color getting accepted into neighborhoods that mostly white people are on, how hard it is for us people of color to get approved for those loans and things like that. So I want Tyler to kind of give us a little spiel about the solution that we could try to look forward to as human beings that we can do personally to get to a better goal in life. So my first question would be for Tyler. So what does the general overview of the solution, steps to getting better results out of redlining?
Yeah.
What does that look like for us as people of the land?
So again, I want to say this with, a conscious and not to be just totally ignorant to the to the situation, because it's going to take a lot more than what I'm going to say. But number one, I think, is education. People have to realize and recognize what redlining was, and then on the backside of that, what could have happened if redlining didn't happen. You know what I mean? And then building off of that, the benefits of real estate and the benefits that non-white families had back in the 30s and 40s. Recognize those benefits and what they did, learn about it, and then start now in 2020, building towards that. Because at the end of the day, if we don't start now, we're going to try to be starting in 2030. So what? Whether minorities families could or couldn't get started in the 30s, that's in the past, right? So now we got to get started now. So I think number one is just education. Number two, and this might, I'm interested to hear what people have to say about this comment. I see a lot of people pushing for more affordable government funded housing.
Yeah.
Me personally, and I'm getting chills talking about it because again, I want to tread lightly around this subject.
For sure.
Me personally, I think more government funded housing for minorities is the worst possible thing for them. Because again, what does that not give them? Ownership, power, right? It's
equity that you just talked about.
All that. And if you think back to 101, BC, thousands and thousands of years ago, what has always been the thing people were after? How did you gain power? Land, right? So you let the government own your land in these communities that you're living in, because if government housing happens, where do you think it's going to happen?
In the redlining neighborhood.
It's not going to happen out by Jordan Creek Mall, right?
No.
You know what I'm saying? So if you're giving up land to the government, there goes your power. The government gets to tell you what to do. And whether people are like it or not, Democrat, Republican, conservative, liberal, the government is not for minorities. I'm sorry. Like, I think I had to put that out there. And again, I expect some flack maybe for that. But, I think the more you can limit the government's help, the better in the long term, because then you get your power back.
And to piggyback off what you were saying, so you don't take all the flack, our community has been told and known to lean on the government. You know what I mean? Like, that's what we've been taught. Like, I've seen that coming up. Like, use the government as much as we can to get ahead. So I get where you're coming from, but you're coming from a different perspective where we need to get out of that mindset, the minority culture, and get into ownership mindset.
And I think, there's certain things that the government should do for you. But the government, again, you relying on the government, what has it got to minority? We're still here in 2020 having, protests and things like that. And still battling the same issues. So,
Yeah, I get that 100%. So my next following to the next question would be, with any progressions, there will be trials that you have to run into, and there will be bumps in the road and things like that. But when it comes to just redlining, what do you think some of the bigger challenges for you and myself that's creating a nonprofit to kind of like battle these issues? What do you think what our biggest challenges would be facing coming forward, and why would there be?
I think just unanimous support, lots and lots of support, and people just getting on the same page and hearing what me and the group are trying to say. Because again, what I just said about stop relying on the government for housing type of thing, that a lot of people will disagree with me. You know what I mean? So I think just kind of preaching that, but once we can get that through, then that whole process starts of education and building towards that. Number two, finding ways to put minorities and minority communities in the position to buy a home. Because at the end of the day, you need money, you need credit, you need stable income, all these different things. And I recognize that not everybody has that. But I think there's different ways in terms of crowdfunding or pooling together a bunch of money.
We got to come up with some ways.
We're going
exactly. We're going to figure something out
with it. So whether it be your family of 10 pooling together money and buying that duplex on the corner type of thing, or whatever it is, I think that's kind of number one. And I think it should be mentioned too that I don't think this can be shaped by 2030 or fixed by 2030. I think it really, really comes into fruition 2-3 generations from now. But if us as 24, 25-year-olds, 26-year-olds, mid-20s, we start preaching to our peers and then they start preaching to their kids learn about homeownership, then more of our peers' kids start buying a house, what are their kids going to do? Buy a house, guaranteed. You know what I mean? So I think it's a really, really long process, but it's all about education and being open-minded to the idea that this section of racial disparity in America could change eventually, with real meaningful steps in action.
And I think kind of what Tyler is getting at in a whole is my people of color, the minority culture, we reference the term generational curses. And
Yeah.
the way to start breaking the generational curse. Go ahead.
It should be. I think that's a real thing.
Yeah.
So,
for a
I want
fact.
to be very clear about that.
Oh, no.
I recognize all that.
Oh no, for a fact it is. And so for us to be able to fix these generational curses, it take people of our age to lock in on the youth, and instill different principles in them that wasn't instilled with us, and which is extremely hard. But like you said, we will need the support of the communities and people around, and also we would need support of the community that's not within ours. We would need support from the nicer areas of the neighborhood and of the city, should I say, to help support us. I think that will give us that boost, that kick to start changing the future, especially for the minority generations.
There are a couple of things out there that, again, the government has done to encourage home ownership in these areas, to reinvest in these poorer communities. One being opportunity zones. So opportunity zone is if you buy a house or a property in this opportunity zone, quote unquote, there's a couple in Des Moines, you get tax advantages to it. But who's in a position to take advantage of that stuff? People not from the community.
That's
what
true.
I mean? So people are coming outside of the community to get these tax advantages, which selfishly speaking, me and you would do the same thing if we're not in a position to do that. But I don't think, again, people in the communities don't know about it. And
education.
And again, you're just losing power, and more people are coming in and buying up property to get these tax advantages. Then all of a sudden, Billy Bob from West Des Moines or Billy Bob from New York City, that's a high net worth or had never been to Des Moines, all of a sudden owns the block,
the whole block.
City, you know what I mean? And that's happening in real life.
Yeah, no, I already know. I think that's great. And my last and final question was for you. You kind of already hit on it a little bit with the solution with the steps and stuff like that. But I was just wanted to see, do you have a foreseeable? I know you said 2030 is not even foreseeable, which I agree with.
Right.
Do you have a foreseeable way to reduce the curve, or I know we working on that daily, but I just kind of explain what a foreseeable way as a community to reduce the curve.
I mean, to a lot of people, I might just be talking.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, that all sounds good, Tyler.
Gotta put the work in.
Right, and again, I want to make this very clear. I recognize the disadvantages that minority people, and the funny thing is, not just minority people too. You know, you see more and more white people in these communities, and so just people in these inner city communities that have been disadvantaged for a long time. I should probably say, I recognize the troubles that they face, but again, I think it comes down to education, and it starts with us and telling our friends and the listeners of this podcast, telling their friends and encouraging them to educate themselves on redlining. So in my head, see a couple years of mass education, waking people up to it, and then ownership after a couple years. And I'm working with a few people right now that are from those communities that are have that mindset, have had that mindset shift. One comes to mind, our good friend Luke, who recently bought a house, and now his mindset has completely shifted. That's what it takes, is taking that action. Now he's in that mindset, and he wants to do more and more of it, and now he wants to go find another property in his that.
And I thought it was dope, just like in Luke's situation, for generations to build him up, and he to step in that role. I thought that was dope, especially saying that from a person of color. I thought that was dope, and you two guys connected on that, and that was great.
And that's what it's gonna take. So if I had to put a timeline on it till if we really die full force and more people get on this thing.
Yeah.
20, 30, 40 years, once our kids start having kids, I think we could maybe really
see a
curve difference, I think more than anything, why I say it's going to take a couple generations is because, it takes certain things to buy a house. You have to have money, you have to have credit, you have to have a good job. So if we can start teaching our kids the importance of those things, then when they turn 22, 23, 24, they can buy a house, and then they teach their kids that, and then they buy a house, and before you know it, you got a whole bunch of homeowners, and
flip that curse into a blessing.
So, and I think what are we teaching our kids? So one thing that I'm personally irritated at, I listen to hip hop music.
Yeah, for sure.
The only hip hop artists and hip hop music, especially in inner cities, is very, very, very influential.
Oh, for a fact.
One thing I wish we'd see more of is, rest in peace, Nipsey Hussle. He's the only rapper, entertainer that I know of that constantly talked about this stuff, about
ownership,
about that $10,000 watch that doesn't break your generational curse. You know what I'm saying? That tricked out G-Wagon, that doesn't break your generational curse. You know what I mean? That, if anything, that adds to it.
And that's
because
things
that's putting a false light in people's faces, kids' faces in particular.
And that's things we have conversations about all the time. Like I'm gonna throw his name out here. I don't care. Lil Durk. Like, he's like one of the hottest artists in the game right now. And if I look on Instagram, I can see 15 to 20 people dressed like Lil Durk every weekend.
Yeah. And to the
and like no discredit to Durk. I mean, he made his money. He changed his family's life, but we gotta see deeper through that.
Well, what do you hold? What do you hold value to?
Yeah, exactly.
What actually matters to you? And I'm all about, if people could see this room, they'd see a whole bunch of shoes lined up against the wall. Like, I'm all about that stuff. I love shoes. I love nice things too.
For sure.
But at a certain point, that doesn't hold much value to me. I'm not attached to those things. I'm not seeking those things. I'm not going out here hustling, trying to make money to do those things. I'm out here hustling, trying to make money so I can go buy some property, or invest in the stock market, whatever it is, whatever you want to do. What do you hold? What is valuable to you? So
as real as it come, and this
real, and be real.
This real. If the best thing you own is a pair of shoes and a pair of jeans and a shirt, you ain't got to figure it out, brother or sister.
Yeah.
So that's the mindset that we trying to get flipped here on the Minds.
Yeah.
No cap.
And again, man, you just got to be real with yourself. Like, and whether you like it or not, the answer, and you're sitting here thinking like, oh, dang, I got these off-whites.
Yeah.
But, you lease a car, or you're, still living in your mom's basement, which that's not a slight on anybody. Everybody's situations are different, but man, you sell those off-whites, you probably have enough to go play your deposit at an apartment and start getting on your own.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I guarantee you, if you sell your off-whites, you get
and for real. And that's the thing. I think on this show, we're kind of looking to be like as human as possible, because these things me and Tyler discussing, we have felt victim to, like, honestly. But we just want to go back and grab a little as we can, more and more, build them up to push ownership and things like that. And then kind of shift the focus from redlining. But the most important, like, one of the biggest and best ways Tyler hit on earlier to generate wealth is through real estate. Like, and that's a fact. And it's almost passive. It's almost passive. If you want to be a landlord, you're going to have to put some work in. But if you buying and flipping, that's passive income. That's just coming into your house.
You just sparked something in my head too.
Go ahead.
When you start this home ownership, so if you buy a rental per se,
Mm-hmm.
and you go hire a property manager, but what if you, Jawan, had not buy a property, and then you manage it for a couple months, and then you realize, okay, this isn't something I want to do. I want to give this to someone else, and then you start a property management company and start employing other Black, brown, Asian people in your company, and then they get started on that, and then you need some some contractors to renovate your house, and you go and seek that out inside.
Put them jobs back in the community.
Yeah, and it's just, I think, just the progress that you can make when you just get into that mindset.
And
is
that's
awesome.
crazy you use me as an example there, because I think one of the biggest goals in my life is to be able to give jobs. Like, to give jobs. That's one of my top goals that I wake up and see every morning when I brush my teeth. Go out and give somebody a job today. So that's crazy you say that, but that flips back into ownership, all of it. Like, I can't give you a job if I'm renting this property, stuff like that. So, cool.
Well, one thing I want to
go ahead, T.
real quick is, like, I don't come here and say that like everybody should buy a house, because obviously I'm a realtor. It's real easy for me to say this, and this isn't a thing to get business. Like, if that's what you think, I don't want your business, in the future. And
education.
Me personally, I highly encourage minorities to get into this field. I know for being real, I know 3 or 4 black realtors in the Des Moines area.
Mhm. You've been trying to get me to become a
I
realtor.
think you'd be good
For
at
real,
it,
for
but
real.
that could be a different discussion. I don't know. Me personally, I know there's a couple out there. Me personally, and I know a lot, I don't know a single LO loan officer, a minority loan officer, in particular a black loan
Mhm.
officer, people that are actually writing mortgages, which today modern redlining is banks just lying to people.
Yep.
Yeah, and just being discriminatory. So
Yep.
you put people that are being discriminated against in these positions, then boom, so enough with the
gimmicks.
Yeah, I'm done.
The gimmicks. No, you're good. You're good. We're gonna end on that note. Tyler, I appreciate you for getting the very first episodes of the Minds with Hakeem podcast. Thank you for coming, man. Thanks for letting us use your space, and most importantly, thank you for the education, brother. And we out.
See ya.
Boom.